you so very much for that introduction. For all of you, I am Lisa Yvette Jones. I am that Chief Encouragement, Inspirational, and Empowerment Coach, Counselor, and Consultant, best-selling author, international speaker. I am also the proud CCO, the Chief Caring Officer of I Care Leadership. Yes, I cultivate those authentic relationships to empower. I support women in leadership who want to maximize their leadership influence, care, cultivating authentic relationships to empower, also while walking alongside of them in their self-care journey. But listen, I came here today to talk about my role as a caregiver. But before I go on any further, I want to thank my Let sister. And you hear us saying Let, and that's the Leadership Experience Tour with Sean Fair. But this is now another platform, the Global Caregiver Summit. Oh my goodness, I am so excited to be here. And I thank God for the visionary of this, Miss Sherelle D. Mims. What a wonderful opportunity that you are giving for caregivers to come forth. And I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share a little bit of my story with your audience. So today, everyone, I am going to share 10 basic qualities of a caregiver. Now, listen, you're going to hear some things that overlap because as caregivers, we understand the role and the things that are going on, in each of our lives. And so you're going to hear some things that we've all kind of went through and shared. So there'll be some things that you may have already heard, but you know what? A repeat is always good, isn't it? Yes. So what I wanted to, just share with you today is that I grew up in a household of 7 children. Okay, it wasn't always 7, but, my mother, as she moved on, started, having additional children. And, I grew up in a single parent household. My mother was amazing. She was dynamic, so my mother also made sure that she was with us during the day. But in the evening, my mother was a performer. So my mother was an actual, celebrity, local celebrity here. And, so that meant that her time, that was out. She didn't do a lot of road traveling because she refused to sign those contracts that were going to have her away from her children. And back in the day, but she would open up for acts like, the Four Tops, the Temptations, and things like that. So my mother had a demand on her time. But she really made sure that she took care of that time when her children were buckled down and, we were with the babysitter, what have you. But listen, there were some days when the babysitter couldn't come. And then it was left up to me. Now, I had an older brother. Okay. But today's children is into video games and all of that. Well, my older brother was into girls and comic books. Okay. So needless to say, as the second oldest, then a lot of that, really fell on me. So my mother was training me every single day on what to do. Back in the day, we weren't putting bottles in microwaves. We were putting them on the stove in a pot of water and counting for 60 seconds. And then, shaking the milk out on your wrist, on the inside of your wrist, making sure it wasn't too hot for the baby. Yes, I had to learn all of that as a little girl. And, caring after my siblings, changing diapers, how to wipe, making sure that I knew, what was normal. And if they would have if a rash or something was coming, she was just teaching me everything that I needed to know in the event that, the babysitter, the person that would oversee our care could not be there with us. And it was very rare that happened. But nevertheless, I still learned to be a caregiver to my siblings at an early age. And so you're thinking, most of the time when I thought of caregiving, I always thought of, people who were always sickly, people who, were maybe, physically challenged in the way or in any way like that. But when I think back over my life, I realized that, no, I started caregiving, very early. And then this is what, Psychology Today says, and if you don't mind, you might see me glance off just a little bit just to look at my note here, but it said caregivers provide the necessary support to someone due to age or illness, disability, or some other factor. My siblings fell into the some other factor, that they couldn't care for themselves. They were too young to do it. So it may involve a myriad of things, but psychology today has a very broad definition of what caregiving is. So for some of you out there who may be struggling with understanding what that is, know that you could very well be a caregiver, and I guarantee that you are. But let me tell you, one of the things that I realized that with that caregiving as a younger child, it was preparing me for the things I was going to face as I got older, and as my mother got older, as my dad got older. Okay. So there were things that I realized then, okay, now I'm beginning to see why I was put in that position to really start looking out, for my siblings, to start understanding what it was like to prepare meals, and to, there were even times when my brothers who were very active would hurt themselves. And here I am, getting a neighbor to take me to the hospital to make sure that they were cared for. We're talking stitches and all of that, while my mother may have had to do like a weekend travel, with her singing career. And then my mother, finally came out of the secular world, and then became, more in the, gave her life to the Lord, and then settled to becoming a gospel singer and what have you. And this still required her to be on the road a little bit, because then people wanted her demand at, her talent in that arena. Nevertheless, I was older by then. My mother then finally stopped being on the road and did a lot more things locally. But here's the thing, as my mother got older and realizing some of the things that my mother went through, hypertension, being overweight, for a long period of time, those things added up. And then what we didn't realize is what the cost of that would be on our mother's life. So one of the things that is going to really be crucial, in this, is some of the things that I'm going to talk about right now. But then also I want to just back up that as a leader, I want leaders to understand too, that please get to know your employees. Please get to know their situation. I'm not saying be so nosy, but there should be ongoing conversations and post-check conversations with your employees, so that you will know and understand what is going on with them. In my agency, I have a collateral duty in addition to my leadership roles and the team that I oversee. I have a collateral duty known as the work-life coordinator, and I am also a peer supporter, supervisory peer supporter to other supervisors that need help. And then I am also, trained in suicide prevention, the QPR method. So one of the things that any new employee coming through our agency, they have to go through me before they onboard for everything. Every new employee that comes on, they have to sit down with me so that I can let them know about all the resources that are available to them. One of the things that I tell them in my speech to them, in my presentation to them, is to make sure that if there's anything going on with you, anything that is of, where it is requiring you to be on your telephone or to care about a loved one, why don't you have that conversation with your supervisor up front? And I let all the leaders know that this is the things that I'm telling them, so that they would be prepared when their employees come to them and say, I need to be on the phone or take care of this, because most of the time that they need the help, the people that need to help them are at work at the same time that they are, right? So then I would tell them to do that. And then I want you to know the statistics that are out there on that. First of all, me being an unpaid a caregiver, and that's the bench that I'm coming from, as an unpaid caregiver. And there are 7.9 billion people in the world, 331 million people in the United States alone. But do you know that there are a total of 44 million unpaid caregivers in the United States? That's 13.5% of the American population that is providing unpaid. But let me tell you, it may not be monetary payment, but it truly is a paycheck of the heart. But then here's another thing. At least 6.6 million, according to the Washington Post and the Household Pulse survey taken from the Census Bureau, that indicates that 6.6 million people who were not working just in March of 2022. Out of all of those millions of people, 6.6 million people in the United States for the month of March alone missed work because they said that they were caring for a loved one. So leaders out there, this is real. There are studies out there on it. So I just wanted to, say that to you, to be a little bit more patient with your people, with your team members, and really making sure that you understand that. So one of the things that was very crucial for us and my siblings and my mother and even my ex-husband, when I would, provide care for him, was making sure that you are going to have some of these qualities that I'm going to list right now. One of the things that was so crucial for my siblings and I was, number one, be observant. And I have 10 of these loaded bullets. So number one is be observant. We started noticing some things about our mother. We started noticing that, of course, with age or what have you, maybe slowing down a little bit. But what we also started noticing is that she was picking up weight. And my mother wasn't eating that much. My mother ate, on small dishes. So we started noticing that. But we also started noticing, because all of us had a key to my mother's home, so we would come in whenever we needed to and whenever we wanted to. My mother loved it. And so there were several of us that had keys to her home. So we would come over before we go to work and all of that. And then we would notice that my mother was sleeping in her recliner chair in her room. And then we were like, oh, you just fell asleep again watching TV? And then after a while, we're like, okay, that's a lot of falling asleep in that chair. What's going on? So we started comparing notes. We were like, you notice mommy was in her chair this morning? Yeah, I noticed that she was in it the other day. Well, what we found out, then my mother started saying, well, you know what? When I lay down, I feel like I'm drowning. And we were like, you feel like you're drowning? What's that about? And so we were like, okay, so maybe if you prop yourself up. So she propped herself up. It wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough. And she just said, nope, I feel more comfortable doing that. Well, not to make a long story as long, we then come over to her house one day in an emergency. My mother called, and she, never wants us to panic about anything. But my mother had swollen so much, because she had went back to trying to lay in her bed and was trying to suffer through that drowning feeling. And my mother's skin was literally leaking fluid. She was leaking fluid from her thighs. She was leaking fluid from her lower legs and her feet. And we were going, what in the world? So we immediately called the ambulance, got her to the hospital, and they couldn't figure it out. All they knew to put a catheter on her and, well, let's see if we can get some of this fluid off. But it was filling up so badly, and then she was still having that same feeling. So it was a visiting doctor that came in from London. He happened to be doing rounds with the other doctors, and he said, let me take a look at her. And he did some studies, and, they did testing and realized that my mother had congestive heart failure. And for those of you who are familiar with congestive heart failure, it will have you, if you're laying flat on your back, your lungs could fill up with fluid instantly and immediately. He said, get her off her back immediately. Get her off her back and elevate her bed. He said, this is why she felt good sitting up. So from now on, she can never lay flat. She can never lay flat. And we're not saying that she sits in her recliner, but what you would have to do is get one of those adjustable beds or a hospital bed. And that's exactly what we did. And guys, let me tell you, they drained over 100 pounds of water off my mother. 100 pounds of fluid came off my mother when he provided this care. So the whole thing is being observant and realizing. There were things I started realizing with my father too. I started noticing things about him, started talking to his wife, and then realized, okay, something just isn't right. So this is what I'm going to do. Not only with him, I'm going to start going to all of his appointments, okay? And then with my mother, the same thing. We all just started taking turns. That leads me to my second point. Number 2, be an advocate. Be an advocate for your loved one. No longer, once my mother started going through sicknesses and illness, and once my dad started to as well, there was no longer them going to an appointment on their own. Not anymore, and not on my watch. So my siblings and I would get together. We weren't a family that argued about who was going to do what. That never happened. And I praise God for that, because we know, as Champ said earlier, that there were, there are family members who argue about this. We didn't, because my siblings love and respect me so much. And I'm like sister mom to my siblings. I brought them all together and I said, we need to come up with a plan. I can take mommy to her appointments on this day. Then we all just got a calendar and started doing that. So we started attending appointments. Here's another thing you want to do, and this is what I did with my dad. This right here is a notebook, okay? I just want to make sure that gets in. It's a regular little notebook, okay? That became very important for my dad's hospitalization, where, my brothers, what I would do then is leave a note. I would take a picture of the wall and see who the current doctor is, the current nurse, their phone numbers. And what we would do is when he was in the hospital, we would do is make sure we took a picture of that, but we would first ask them, is it current? Because sometimes they get busy and they change a shift and they don't change that board. And so we had to make sure that the current nurse, the current CNA, the current doctor, and their phone numbers were all current. I would take a picture of that, send it all to my siblings. They would do the same for me if it was a day that I wasn't going to be at the hospital or in the nursing rehab facility where my mother was. Know the staff, know the staff on each shift. If your parents are going to be in the hospital, that's all still part of being an advocate, because what you want to do is you don't want, 7 siblings calling the nurse's station, checking on your parent. So what we came up with was an arrangement to say, okay, I will call on this day. This is my day to visit. I'm going to call, and then I will check on mommy during the night. And then, somebody else would, wake up out of their sleep the next night and the night after that. So we were very organized in how we were setting up everything. And the nurses, they appreciated it. The doctors, they appreciated that they could talk to one family member at a time. They knew here are the family members that you can talk to, but then talk to one of us at a time. And then for my dad, what I would do is I would leave notes in the notebook on things that I observed, things that I had asked to be taken care of, and things that, that I felt my brothers needed to know. And I would put it in a place that we know people weren't going in their things, because it wasn't for the church members and everybody coming to visit. It wasn't for them to look at it. It was just strictly for family members. And we would date it. We will put a time on it and then go from there. If there was any new diagnosis that came up with my mother while she was in the hospital, we told the doctor it was okay that you leave a note on the window. He would tape it on the window with tape from the the tape that you put on, the medical tape that you would use for IV and all of that. He would leave it stuck on the window. Okay. And then what each of us would do is when we saw it, we would initial and date it to show that we have all read it. That would satisfy the doctor. Then we would take it down and put it in my mother's folder and then go from there. So just many things that you could do to be, know their medication, seek alternative solutions. The person that you really want to become your best friend, especially when a loved one is in a hospital, you want the social worker. You want to know who the social worker is. And so that social worker can advocate for their care as well. And be kind to the nurses. Be kind to the medical staff. One of the things that my father wanted, he said, you know what? And he was in and out of dementia, and I say in and out because some days he was fine. And the next days, it was like, okay, who is this person? He one day when he was himself, he looked at me, he said, every one of these people that's been over my care, he said, I want a Christmas gift for every single one of them. He said, don't you leave anybody out, including the cleaning people. So I then had to get all 3 shifts who had been seeing about my father, get all of their names. And I made sure my daddy saw that I beautifully packaged a gift for each and every one of them. Now, I'm also a Mary Kay beauty consultant. So I had wonderful caregiving gifts that I wanted to give to my sheroes in the healthcare industry. And every single one of the nurses, including the doctors, including the CNAs, including the cleaning staff, and even the lunch team people who came through during that time, I made sure they got a gift. I brought them all and laid them all over my dad's bed in front of him. It took 3 of us, maybe 2 trips to bring all the gifts up. And we left them with the staff. So please be kind to your nursing staff, and they will truly, repay that in kind, because these are the people overseeing our loved ones' care. You want to make sure that you are being kind to them. Ask for assistance. Again, social workers are your best friends. There was a time, because I traveled with my job, I had to go out of town. Then my sister had something going on, and a couple of my brothers. And then one of the church members said, is there anything I can do? And then, people say that and you kind of wonder, well, do they really mean it? And then so I just told one of them, I said, yes, there is something you can do. On Thursday and Friday of this week, we need someone to be at the hospital at this time. Which time can you take? And then they were like, oh, sure, I can be up here. And then Lisa, you want me to call sister so-and-so? And you want me, and then I can have, my son come up, you know how he loves your mother, and they sing together and what have you. And then before you knew it, they were waiting. They were waiting to join in community with my family and me. They were waiting to see what they can do. So people, when you trust, only those you trust, and not ones that's going to go out and gossip and all of that, but the ones that you trust, when they say, is there anything I can do? You know what? Say, yes. There is something you can do, and I need you to do that. And then on Sundays, you guys, they're coming after church. You can come anytime you want. And but then my mother is coming on this day. I need someone to sit with my mother at this time, or blah, blah, blah. So it got the people involved as we needed them to get involved. You also know that there are agencies out there available. There's the National Alliance for Caregiving. There is I work for the federal government, so you have, and I don't work for this agency, but we also have the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. They have resources that are available. We have the National we have the Medline Plus, we have Elder Care Plus, we have the AARP. Those are available. We have NIH. There are so many more. And as I indicated earlier, for most employees who are in the federal government, and for some of you who may be in private industry, you have your Employee Assistance Program, EAP, who also works in tandem with the Federal Occupational Health Services, who provide services to over 3 million federal government workers for their loved ones. Okay, they provide elder care services, they provide legal services, they provide college care services, child care, prenatal services, you name it. Federal occupational health is there for you. So please do not neglect to reach out to the social worker at the hospitals or to these different agencies and say, this is where I need you. How can you partner with me in my loved one's care? Here's another thing. You must be emotionally astute. You must have your emotions in check, because let me tell you, there are times when my dad was going, where I wasn't sure of what was going on with him, where I was having him tested for dementia. And, I wasn't quite understanding what was going on. It was like, why is he saying that? Why did he just cuss me out? I'm the only one I'm the one taking off work, going to the doctors. And my off days are not vacation days. These are literally days that I'm scheduling well in advance, because I have all of his doctor's appointments scheduled out through the next 4 or 5 months. And so these are not vacation days for me to just vacate. Why is he doing that? Well, not realizing that, once we found out he was going through, then realizing, okay, Lisa, so I had to learn to make sure that I was being responsive, stop and think, just pause. All I'm telling you to do is just pause when those things happen. Lord Jesus, just pause, and then you respond and not react, okay? Because I always tell my team members, it's so easy to react because it takes no thought. But when you respond, you take the time to pause, you take the time to think, and then you take the time to respond intelligently, and do so. Make sure you do that. And then when learning that my dad was going through dementia and learning that he was going through that, I was just one day just so like at my wit's end, because I didn't know what was going on. And so I was talking to a former team member who I knew had gone through it. And she said, oh, Lisa, I have the cure for you. And you heard what my friend Lisa said earlier, Lisa Skinner. But this other, person that I know, they said, Lisa, just learn to dance. And I said, what are you talking about? I'm talking about my dad with dementia. And you're talking about learning to dance. What are you talking about? She said, Lisa, learn to dance. She said that was the best advice I could have been given when my dad was going through dementia. So she said, I want to tell you the same thing. Learn to dance. So she said, if he's talking about his childhood, she said, stop correcting him. You're only going to frustrate yourself. I said, and I do. Oh my gosh. And he'll say things that I'm like, that's not true, Daddy, blah, blah, blah. She said, stop it. You're only frustrating yourself and you're frustrating the family. She said, learn to dance. So where he leads you, She said, at that point, when you're talking to your dad, he has you in his arms and he's taking the lead. So she said, if he takes 2 steps forward, you then take the steps. And then she said, if he takes a step backwards, if he dips you, okay, you go there. Because she said, sometimes it's a dip, girl, it's a dip. So then I said, okay, I will learn to do that. And true enough, once she taught me, learn to dance, just allow him to be the lead and you follow. I had so much relief come off of me. So much relief come off of me. Oh my goodness. And I can't tell you. I'm going to go through these next ones really quickly because I want to respect my time. And then the other one is be resourceful. Okay. Know the state of your loved ones' finances, but you also need to know the state of yours in case you have to help. There were many days when my dad was going in and out of, his, dementia. He didn't want to pay for medicine. He just thought, that's too much. I'm not paying that. I'm not paying that high cost for that. And he would go on this rampant, so I started to the point where I would drop him off from his doctor's appointments, or I would drop him off at his house. And then, I would, and his wife and I would talk. She would transfer even money to me. Some days I just said, forget it. We were standing right there and we need to make the payment right then. And I would make the payment. When it came to his glasses, no problem. Daddy, we got, oh, Daddy, it's fine. Your bill, oh no, your bill is taken care of already. Oh, they ain't charging nothing for the glasses. They ain't charging you, but they sure charged me them $250. Okay. They did. But then I had to make sure that I knew what I can give out to my father without depleting my own household. Does that make sense to everybody? Put it in the chat. Put it in the chat. I know it does. Here's what I want you to also do. Calendar time for yourself. Calendar time for your appointments, your mammograms, your pap smears. Listen, I had to do that in the midst of my mother having had a stroke in February of 2009. February 2009, my mother had a stroke. Okay, but then my mother came through that. Oh, she did. Now, both my parents have gone on to be with the Lord. Okay, my father 3 years and my mother in 2011. But let me tell you, and I miss them both dearly. But in 2009, my mother, suffered a stroke. She was in the hospital for a couple of months. She came home right about this time because it was almost time to celebrate my birthday, which is April 12th, this Tuesday, and her birthday, April 18th. Well, in April, I decided, I've been seeing about mine. Let me go and have my pap smear. Well, one appointment led to another where I was before 2 gynecologic oncologists who both told me that if I didn't have surgery within 3 days, 3 to 7 days, that I would die because I was diagnosed with stage 3 papillary serous carcinoma of the cervix. Mind you, I had not one symptom. No symptoms, just like high blood pressure, a silent killer. So is cervical cancer, ladies. Keep your appointments. I was diagnosed with stage 3 cervical cancer, and I thought, how can I tell my mother this right now? That her oldest daughter, right now has been diagnosed with stage 3 cervical cancer. I will not be the one to trip her back up to go back in the hospital. Now, do you see, as a caregiver, what I was doing? I was totally putting me off to the side with a deadly disease told to me by 2 different pathological reports, 2 different gynecologic oncologists. And then, not to mention, my son was just finishing up his studies. He was finishing up his studies at a boarding school, and I didn't want to interrupt his studies. So then here I am with stage 3 cervical cancer as they diagnosed. I don't like to make claim. And then so I said, okay, I had to go to my chief physician. You see, because I trust the doctors for my diagnosis, but I promise you, I went to the chief physician for my prognosis. And he told me, you shall live and not die. This is not unto death. So on that point, and he told me then, you scheduled the date of the surgery. So I scheduled that surgery a month and a half after the doctors told me that I would not live and that I would die. I scheduled it a month and a half later. They said, you are one stubborn patient. I said, you got me wrong, doctor. I am one steadfast patient. Will you join your faith with mine through this journey with me? And here I am now, what is that? Almost 13 years later. So God is amazing. He is so good. But so I want to make sure now, had I not calendared that time, ladies, I would not be here today to share these 10 wonderful qualities of a caregiver with you. Had I not done that, I would not have seen my son graduate. Had I not done that, so many other things would have been into place because they only gave me a short window of life, but God gave me my prognosis, and that is who I depend on. And then I want you to also realize that self-care isn't selfish. It is necessary. You must make sure you take care of yourself. That's number 8. Know your numbers. Know your blood pressure. Know your blood type. Do you know your blood type? Because you never know when you may have to give blood to a loved one. So know your blood type and know that you can give blood to a loved one, because if you've had certain diseases or certain illnesses that have come upon you, they will recommend that you not give blood. You need to know that too. So make sure you know your weight, know your cholesterol level, know your blood type, and go from there. Number 9, please respect your loved one's wishes. Respect their wishes. Respect, let me tell you, I have to take off my glasses for this, because my mother knew she couldn't tell me at the time that do not resuscitate. She couldn't. She had to tell my sister that. She had to tell my sister. Now, although rapid response came in her room a couple of times and we were devastated by that, but at that time, because I was really just, I'm a fighter for my mother. I was a fighter for her. It's like, no, her health and her care means everything. So she never told me. So when it came time for my mother's death, I was with her the night before. But that next morning, we couldn't get in touch with her, only to find out she had passed. And then I was telling them, I was so upset with the medical team, because I said, why didn't you call us? Why didn't you tell us? And why didn't you this? And my sister stopped me and she shook me. She said, Mommy didn't want it. And she said, I have it in writing, Lisa. And I was just so shocked. My sister even kept that from me because they know me. So it only prepared me for when it was time for my dad, who passed 3 years ago. He let me know very clearly. He said, don't do that. Don't let me just go, but don't do any of that. And I finally understood that. Understand whether or not they want to be in hospice care. All of that. You need to make sure that you are respecting their wishes and not doing anything above and beyond what they want. And lastly, pray. Pray. I'm going to tell you now, for those of you who know the words and the worth of prayer, that is what is going to get you through. If I hadn't taken time out to go on a fast and pray for 3 days, and on that third day, God spoke to me and told me that this was not unto death, that I should live and not die, I would never have known my prognosis. But let me tell you, when you keep God first, He will do the rest. This is Lisa Yvette Jones. I hope you found these 10 basic qualities of a caregiver helpful to you. I can be reached at Lisa Yvette, Yvette Jones @gmail.com. I can also be reached on social media by my same name, Lisa Yvette Jones. I am also at LisaYvetteJones.com for the I Care Leadership, my company as well. And I can be reached by telephone 1-248-952-8122. That's 1-248-952-8122. It has been a plum pleasing pleasure to be with each and every one of you, and know that greatness is still left in each and every one of you. Back to you, Sherelle or Constance. You're on mute, Constance. You're muted. Constance, you're muted.
Oh, wow. I'm just having a nice little conversation over here by myself. Anyway, as I was saying while muted, that it has been a plum-pleasing pleasure for me to listen to your speech.
Amen.
And I'm about ready to go and get some folding chairs and line them up here in my den and open the doors of the church.
Come on,
you brought it. You brought it, but you said what needs to be heard. Put your trust in God,
yes,
not in man.
Not in man.
Because He is the author and the finisher. He knows it all, and we have nothing to worry about. Just trust Him.
Amen.
Trust,
we do.
And depend on Him.
Yes.
So I thank you so much for that wonderful speech.
Thank you.
I thank you so much.